This is my first time watching this movie, even though I bought it back when it was newly released. That should give you a clue to how much attention I've been paying in regards to superhero movies. At the top of the year, I started reading comic books, so that reinvigorated my interest in watching superhero movies. So here I am, having watched Aquaman in all its deep water Atlantean mythos of CGI oceanic effects, I think it's safe to say that it probably aroused the ire of one Michael Bay. Because this looked a lot better than any of the indiscernible metal debris transforming. So, here I am, reviewing the movie starring every wife's favorite seaman. Aquaman, Arthur, a character whom, if I recall correctly, and if I look into the archives of my childhood, I only remember this character for being the butt of every joke. But now he's become the fervent fixation of every married woman. I did not hate this movie, I did not dislike it, but I don't think I would watch it more than once. It was way too long with too many plot threads, and I was thinking that if I'd watched this in a movie theater without the luxury of being able to pause it and take a breather, I'd probably be annoyed. It was a little too ambitious. They crammed way too much into this first installment, and that's why they got themselves into a situation where one of their characters, Black Manta, got lost in the shuffle. He was there at the beginning of the movie. He was the first antagonist introduced that created some animosity with Aquaman. Black Manta and his dad hijack a submarine, Aquaman intervenes and then has a fight scene with them. So it ends with Manta's dad stuck under a missile while the submarine is sinking. Manta asks Aquaman for help and he tells him ask the sea for mercy. And so now we have a supervillain with a motivation that'll create a nemesis for Aquaman. Not the strongest motivation, but it was still a setup nonetheless. I thought it was an odd choice not to cut this out of the movie because it doesn't conclude with Aquaman defeating Black Manta. No, instead, Black Manta shows up in the end credit scene to tease the sequel. You know what I thought would have been a better use of Black Manta was if they had the fight scene play out the same way it did, just don't let us know it's Black Manta. You know, have the scene seem like it was only there to introduce us to Aquaman. The hero saves the day, make it seem like it's an inconsequential scene. Then, in the end credits, you reveal it was Black Manta setting up the main antagonist for the sequel. It would have been better than having to remind us in this movie that Manta was also a part of it, because he becomes an afterthought to the actual main antagonist. It did make more sense to go with Patrick Gleason's character seeming from the previous established events of how Arthur was born, and it made for a more interesting first movie. The only thing I knew about the starring cast in this movie was that Jason Momoa and Amber Heard were in it. So I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that Patrick Gleason was not only in it, but was going to be the main antagonist. I like him in the Insidious and the Conjuring films. So it was pretty surprising to see him in a superhero film. And he's Aquaman's stepbrother, and they go on to have a sibling rivalry. So I thought that Gleason's character was a better choice than Manta to be Arthur's nemesis because he's his stepbrother. And it also complements the Atlantean mythos of the film. And I think that his motivations were stronger than Manta's for the most part. He's the current king of the sea, but like any greedy person in power, he wants more. So he fabricates an attack by the humans in the ocean to justify going to war, to eventually become the one true power commanding the entire planet. So now that Aquaman, as the protagonist, is tasked to overthrow his brother, I do not think he had the strongest character arc. In the first act, he's introduced as a beer-drinking badass, similar to like a Stone Cold Steve Austin prototype.
Speak up for you.
And he never returns to being that person. He then goes on to become an underdog, losing his fights, having self-doubt, and just barely winning. While this is going on, we're also getting flashbacks to when he was a teenager and he's being trained by William Dafoe. He was being taught how to fight, but it wasn't his training that made him go through self-actualization. It was his mother telling him a king fights for a nation and a hero fights for everyone. I didn't like this. And that's the moment where he becomes Aquaman in all his glory. This film had so many moving pieces that at times it felt like an amalgamation of different movies. Like the aforementioned training flashbacks with William Dafoe, that had a certain Luke Skywalker Yoda quality to it, at least a light version of it. Then there was Momoa journeying into the Sahara Desert with Amber. This whole part felt like I was dropped into a Disney movie. It's like I was watching National Treasures. Even the romantic subplot of Momoa and Amber was reminiscent of Disney acting. I want to mention something I noticed. They tried to draw a parallel between a fish out of the water moment that Nicole Kidman had at the beginning of the movie to Amber Heard in Italy. So Nicole Kidman woke up to find herself in a lighthouse after being aided by Momoa's dad. Well, soon to be dad. So when she wakes up, she eats a goldfish out of a fishbowl. Which at first you might think that's as on the nose as it can get because it's a fish out of the water moment. And she's literally eating a fish. But she's from the ocean, so it was in character. It's in her diet to eat fish, so I thought it was a suitable gag. And I mentioned this because they tried to like mirror this with Amber eating roses in Italy, but that just had no weight to it. It was a very weak callback. Unless they were trying to create a metaphor or an allegory for this romance subplot by having her eat a symbol of love. By the way, at the beginning of this movie, when Aquaman's dad and mom and Arthur are shown as a family, the way it was presented felt like your typical middle-class family that's depicted in a Spielberg film. I thought to myself, if Spielberg ever made a superhero film, this is the atmosphere he would probably create. Something else that James Wan created for this film was its own trope. So whenever characters are having a conversation, albeit delivering exposition or just enjoying themselves, they're interrupted by an explosion. It was just something fun to point out. My favorite part in this movie comes when director James Wan, who's known for his Conjuring movies, gave us a nugget of horror in this movie. And I was so happy that it happened in the ocean. Momoa and Amber are out in the ocean on a boat when the devolved Atlantean gremlins come to attack them. As a horror fan, I really appreciated this whole part. It even had music that was reminiscent of a score from a Conjuring movie. If I recall correctly, this movie was rumored to be a horror film. I remember being excited for it, and then when I found out it wasn't horror, that's when I decided not to go watch it, I think. When the last CGI battle happens in this movie, I thought to myself, this is what Marvel's Civil War should have looked like. Because in that movie, instead we got something that looked like a WWE parking lot brawl match. Something I really enjoyed about this film that I thought was really strong was the Atlantean, lore that it created for itself. I just don't think it was utilized that well because even the backstory of the previous king was more compelling than the story we got for this film. They really tried to make this film feel like it was important, more than just a little side piece character on the side. What I thought was a more compelling character arc for the character of Aquaman wasn't what happened in this film. It was the character of Aquaman being the butt of every joke to all of a sudden getting his own film and being a heartthrob. Who would have thought it? All the DNA jokes and now having a live action film. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like, give me a subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you.